Welcome back to the True Church of Jesus Christ with his Latter-day Saint. In this episode, we'll get into some talks about principalities, rulers, authorities, the ideas behind the city of the nine gates, and some of the things in Ephesians 6. So we'll go to Ephesians 6 right off the bat. And for the people out there that are new to the channel and might not know the mission of God, what we're trying to do is have God realization. So John 14, verse 21. If we follow the commands are very simple. If we believe in God's name, who I am, the great I am appears as Jesus Christ. And if we follow this way of my commandments, my philosophies, God's point of view about life, it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to offer some challenges while we're going through the 7 days of the week. See, those principles also are embodied as fallen beings known as Satan. So this creation came from another realm, and it's solidified as our planets, sun, moon, and stars, and also the 12 months of the year. All this is considered man's lost and fallen state in a universe that fell away from a higher realm. And Matthew chapter 6 is how we get back to, you could say, our spiritual heritage, our spiritual origins. And while we're walking through the 7 days of the week, there's going to be a deny thyself, pick up the cross. But this self has it has a lot of intricacies with it as well. So what God teaches the soul is that the soul is in a lost and fallen state, and it's not your true identity. This soul generates, you could say, the operations of nature within your own imagining. So just imagine the human being is just a memory bank. And when he walks outside, he's just always gathering information from the environment and this electromagnetic nature. And he needs his eyes, you could say, to, well, give him the operations of nature. So he could see forms, so he could see plants, so he could actually govern himself within this system. But this creation doesn't have God's government in it. See, what God teaches of the soul is in a lost and fallen state and under the five-headed serpent, or under death, or under these other forces of nature, which are actual persons. Say the fallen angels, they are behind, you could say, the electromagnetism, earth, air, fire, water. They're operating behind the forces of man's soul. So while he's going through the walk of life, we put on the armor of God. Draw close to your strength from the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the armor of God so you can be able to stand firm against the tactics of the devil. Now, God also works in symbols. Not just in symbols, but how the creation actually is. When God caused a dragon to come out of the spiritual worlds, this is the dragon, Satan, and all of the 10,000 things that have solidified into this material nature. That's why the clay pots, let's say your body is basically a mold, and what's poured into this mold is a operation from this lower nature, Satan and his demi-forces. See, in the blueprints of the city of the nine gates, this all has to do with the proper study and outlook of what God created. And if God said that this Satan took a rib or a firmament or a age away from man and had grafted him a material nature, all based off illusion. See, man's operative consciousness, well, in those parables, it says that his own intelligence is not real, and it's actually one of the fallen angels trying to lead the spirit souls into hell. So when Satan says in the Quran, "O Adam," or "O King Perunjana," you see that city of the nine gates? It has a five-headed serpent, and the five-headed serpent generates the atmosphere of basically nature. So it describes in the parable the architecture of the city within the nine gates. It has gardens. You see, just like nature outside. But the mortal intelligence doesn't know where it came from. and it's supplied by a misty ancient darkness known as Satan, or the five-headed serpent. So the blueprint behind the 9 gates is always a choose ye which day you're going to serve, this higher wisdom. And it takes your time, sacrifice. Time should be considered sacrifice because men have to sacrifice their time either for money. See, they could choose ye which day. They could choose the lower principle, getting involved in their contaminated intelligence and basically the outer external world. Now, according to the blueprints of the 9 gates, this is a fallen world. It doesn't have the self-effulgence of God. And not only that, but a group of fiends is looking to kill man and throw him into hell. See, that knowledge isn't included in the normal periphery of man. That's why our walk is of one of sacrifice each day to these principles. So why are we denying our soul nature? Because our soul is polluted with the devil and his angels inside. And what does that mean? Well, man has various forms of evil and evil impulses that he can indulge in. He can indulge in these carnal desires. But if we follow the spirit, which is I, see, I is different from the soul. And this is how we become reborn, by understanding the names of God. Remember, God is who I am, and God does not attach any other conception, stereotype. And that's the thing that we have to practice in order to be liberated from the material scene. So that's the oriental wisdom of nothingness. So if people out there haven't accessed the void, or God consciousness, or I will manifest myself, there is a true emptiness that stops man from generating forms within his own mind. See, the soul, it generates, well, other people in its experience. That's why God tells us to be out of the world or take time to pray. So the people that are not engaged in prayer, what they have is just the outer soul experience. And it generates wife, family, and it keeps thinking about this generation of forms. And what people are finding out there is that family life, jobs, all these things lead to misery in our time. Big time. And it's because of man's spiritual darkness. His soul is an actual disease from this lower nature. But I am in the midst of all being. God operates in the heart. And God has no eyes. God is not a crooked branch or Jesus Christ. He's a spirit, just like he says in John 4. And you have to worship me in spirit and in truth. But while this is happening, there's going to be principalities. See, these hidden demi-forces within man. Greed, anger, hatred, lust. His own demi-forces or fallen angels will always impact his own character, or I. And I am invisible, just like God, in God's image and likeness. So if God is invisible, we have to practice that so am I, even though it does not appear that way. Practicing spirituality is difficult when people are in matter, and practicing I is the invisible side of life. So if people want to come all the way back home, they have to cross the other side, and crossing the other side is their own evil impulses, or understanding the blueprint of the city of the 9 gates and what God requires. God requires you to turn away from your 5 physical senses. Your 5 physical senses are clothed with other evil beings known as Satan and his hosts, or the wolf in John chapter 10, or death. All of these things out here are considered death because man used to belong in a spiritual kingdom with a bright nature and immortal. He did not have any of these evils within his consciousness at a certain point in this realm as well. And this is what we're trying to do. The realm of the Sabbath, see, God caused evil to be expelled away from his realm. If people are experiencing evil, they have to come back within me, and my kingdom has overcome. So John 16, the last verse there, verse 33. I have overcome the world. And in God's perspective, the world is called darkness. So anything that men think, see the light that shines in the darkness? Men do not think about purity. That's Galatians 5, verse 16. You see these virtues? Men don't even think about God within them. And this is what being reborn means. We're not going to be thinking about the pictures of our own soul. Our own soul works like a exercise bike, a stationary bike. You know how people can hop on it and ride really, really fast? Well, the wheels on that bike can be the mind. But if people don't worship God or don't pray, when people use their ideas, you see, they just have their own soul nature, and they're not really riding that bike really fast because other people are inside their minds. They're not practicing the one consciousness or the one person. So even for higher mental faculties, if people want to be released from the sludge of ignorance, they have to practice the one person in the heart and prayer. God is invisible. He does not have my eyes, my hands, my feet. God is a perfect person. And that's very important when men are trying to rid disease or rid sin out of their life, is that they have to practice the invisible God while they're in visible matter, and they could be going through the three fires or the three disasters. Their thoughts, feelings, and actions are on fire with tribulations, or Matthew 13. See, the way back out of your soul and into I is rough, rocky, and difficult against these principalities, against evil impulses within ourselves. Our battle is not against human forces. God's telling us that this universe was a result of a fall, a war against him. So Matthew 22, this is what our walk is. See, when the devil says, hey, look, it's the inheritor right there. Let's come and kill him. Well, that's what this Bhagavad Gita is about. Is that the secret mystery of being on the way is your own soul are these old contaminated beings, and they're trying to kill you, just like they tried to kill the Christ. These parables awaken the fact that our battle anymore is not with people in front of our faces. Or the way back home to God now is not with people in front of our faces. If people are interested in God realization, they have to practice the crucifixion, which is the no mind technique. So while they're sitting there in prayer, you cannot contemplate things of this world. You have to understand that this world does not exist, just like what God says. So out of the non-existence, how do we find life? See, now we could think, well, at least some people could think, if this world doesn't exist, then how do I get life in a place that doesn't exist? See the seed that has to pop out of the ground? That's prayer. Mankind is a conditioned seed, and he has to break out of the material concept of his own conditioning. And his own conditioning is a mortal body that's been clothed with the spiritual darkness known as Satan. And he must not use his five senses to gauge his outer experience. He has to use God's knowledge and God's wisdom. And this boat, as it's called, the material body, should be considered a boat to come back home. And it has no other purpose other than coming back home. But that coming back home, as it says in the Book of Mormon, is very difficult. 1 Nephi, chapter 8, verse 23. And it came to pass that there arose a misty darkness, yea, even an exceedingly great mist of darkness, insomuch that they had commenced on the path and lost their way and wandered off and were lost. So while people are going through life's challenges in life, trying to get God to help them, that's what you're supposed to do no matter what. The Apocryphian of Paul outlines that clearly, that Matthew chapter 6 is our only way to live life and have God supply our needs while he's using the boat of our material body. So we're always practicing that I am in the midst of me, or where I am is holy ground. And when life's problems happen, this is the darkness that he's talking about here in the scripture. What it is just the doubts, fears, worries, and frights about daily living. Let's say, how's God going to pay my bills when I have no money? How's God going to take care of me when I'm sick? Or how's God going to take care of me when I'm destitute with a broken body? How's God going to take care of me in this situation? See this survival? How's God going to do this? How's God going to do that? Well, he does it by prayer. And our prayers. And only his way. So God made this creation, and he made man to pray just for God's presence, or the good shepherd, in order to live his life day by day. But he's not living a material life anymore. He's not going to be chasing jobs and chasing money and chasing women, chasing houses and cars. So for the people out there that are engaged in a job, they should be grateful for the job that they have. And now focus your attitudes on coming back home, since you already have a job out there in the world. What else are you supposed to do now other than go to work? So if other people want to go to work, I had that dispensation too, until the horse breaks one of its legs. And just like Mother Nature, they shoot the horse and throw it in the glue factory. So that was my destination in life. I worked and worked and worked until the horse broke its back. You see this great misty darkness? Now how could God help me in my life when I'm screwed? Or when this happens, or when that happens? It requires faith. Do you first believe in Jesus Christ and who I am? If you don't, then nobody's going to help you in this cruel nature. We can see that with everybody out there. And in this time of darkness, when people are greedy and just care about money, nobody's getting the proper necessities to them in their experience. So when this great misty darkness happens, all the times people have been thinking about their wife and their children and their jobs, you see, it doesn't help. And what it is this ancient darkness. Men's thoughts are actually the contaminated ideas of Satan working in their lives. That's what this ancient spiritual darkness is. And that's why our war is not in the flesh. But when we work towards the revelation clears all of one's experience. And that's what lifting the veil means. When one had the veil lifted over them, all what they went through goes away. And you've been revealed now your higher or true nature or true identity or the kingdom of God. And that's what men are supposed to work towards, regardless if they're in a good situation or in a bad situation. If you're in a bad situation, it's a lot easier because you could detach from the outer world based on your condition. If you can't work, so what? The whole world out there is just slaving like dogs for money. Let them go do that. Suffer a little bit for God. Suffer for your divinity, as God says. Suffer with me, because that's what God did. He showed man the example in order to receive immortality. So we're not just struggling like idiots. We're trying to receive immortality. How much money can you buy something that you cannot do out in the world? So people that are living good and have quote-unquote jobs, good for you. After a certain time, when you don't have a job, you're going to have nothing and no idea about immortality. So what is your life going to be, or what did it bring itself to, as it says in the scriptures? Most people bring themselves to nothing, even though they worked for 20, 30 years and are forced to retire. But then what after? That's what I'm trying to say. People can live good. People can live their jobs, do whatever, yeah. But then there's going to come a point in time when you can't do those things, whether through old age, retirement, or whether through disease or sickness. And since men have been brainwashed just to work like money, for money, like pigs and greedy dogs, they lost any semblance to receiving something priceless. That's why God's been hidden. God's been obscured. It takes people with real determination, real courage in life to go against the grain, quote unquote, because everybody out there is just working for objects. There is no immortality, no kingdom of God, no divine inheritance, no enlightenment. Either way, if people do find themselves in a good situation, you only work 8 hours a day. What are you going to do with the rest of the 5-6 hours? Most people go home and watch TV. Well, we could grind up knowledge. And not only that, grinding up knowledge brings us closer to what this nature is all about. What this life is all about for living one's life. We bring God into our experience because, like that seed, it needs to grow. The soul needs to grow. It cannot grow in greedy materialistic circumstances. The soul is only going to be oppressed by going to work 9 to 5 and feeling hopeless and anxious and miserable. Especially if people don't have to do that. When I worked a job in a factory, a lot of people didn't need to work. Some of them were just bored and had nothing else to do. I'm like, why the hell would you come down here and slave for nothing? It's because people are ingrained to working like animals, as it says in the scriptures. See, this time of evil has locked people into a mode of thinking where work is the only thing you do with your body. That's it. And if you can't work, then society looks at you like a friggin' piece of crap on the ground. Well, when that happens to one's life, we have to pick up the cross. So I know what it's like to be trampled, but so does God. God says, if you are trampled and if you cannot be used like salt to be seasoned with the new flavor of my gospel, then you are going to get trampled down by men out in the world. They don't give a damn. That's how this world is. It's a very harsh world, and the gospel is very explicit at telling us how harsh it is. So if one is dead on the ground like Job and doesn't want to be used in life, then God already says you're already going to be trampled and God can't use you. In these circumstances where that seed has to grow, it could grow with extremes. Like in my circumstance, I had to really make sure that soul broke out of the soul conditions and found God. Found the great I am, or else it was going to be stuck in whatever ditch the devil has left with it. Or you could say the contaminated modes of nature working within the false conception. The false ego in the wolf is very real. The false conception that this world is real is illusion. And one needs spiritual enlightenment in order to break this ancient curse, a shadow over man's minds. A shadow. Just imagine if I told people that a shadow was operating. See, it was operating on my consciousness for 30 years. Man's ancient darkness. And then I got crushed in the year 2017. Or the trials by fire. And I had to go through the refiner's fire. What does that mean? Prayer. Stick to me. See that rod? When things get dark in life, do you have the balls to stick to me in life? Or are you going to go out in the world? That's another thing too. When things are forced upon people, that's when the stone breaks, as it says in the scripture. And blessed he that the stone crushes. And it crushes us into the resurrection. Or like he said to the Jews, I've came to crush this temple of Solomon. And they cried and said, who are you? You're just, well, we don't, I say, I know who he is now. Who do men say that I am? So this new kingdom come, that's what that means as well. Men's work will come to nothing, and a new resurrection will come in, or a new spiritual being. the resurrected wine, that can only be revealed. I can reveal myself to people if they work for it. But if they don't work for it, the material situation doesn't add too much to man's experience, especially over a longer course of time, due to basically his short-sightedness, and especially in this day and age of greed. So people just in it to accumulate money, their biggest fear is hitting 40 and 50 years old because they can't accumulate money like they did when they were younger. So that's what people have to look forward to when they're old, is just how you're going to stay alive making money miserably, going from job to job. If that's the people's concept, see the concept of material living, if that's people's concept, then they could live it. The pathway to hell is wide, as it says. Oh, it's wide indeed. With no godlessness, no way in their life at all. The only way people have is slavery to this modern time. And especially man's corruption with money itself. The grips of money can be helped only by prayer. That's also God's mission with the beast. This earth, God made war with this earth. See Matthew 22? I have come and these people try to make war with me. But God, if you pray and put on the armor, I will help you with this money that this beast, these men, these Satans, these dead branches are trying to rule this creation with. Men aren't even trying to rule the creation with, you could say, wind, fire, and water. They're just trying to rule it with money, paper. So in order to stop this wave of catastrophe in our lives, especially this overwhelming dependence on these useless dollar bills, prayer and lifting our consciousness above the material concept is almost like pulling yourself out of the quicksand. Especially if one's already sick, destitute, misfortune, and impoverished. Bringing yourself out of the quicksand of mundane mortality, of all the mundaners out there sludging around for money. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of prayer, and that's why people don't do this type of thing. And that's why God remains hidden within them. And then after a certain course, see this time. Well, no one's ever mastered time. Not even the pretty girls that want their teats raised up to their faces when they hit 40 and 50. There is no amount of makeup for your clown shoes to overcome old age. And then they go off into the fires after, which is known as vanity. So that's what people have to look forward to in life. Keeping up their teats. And after a certain point, they drop real low, and the women are trying to keep them up. Wonderful. See the materialistic concept? It doesn't have anything good in it, especially for the long run. If people don't have insight to their life, then all they have to look forward to is propping their teats up. Both men and women. So we'll go to the Bhagavad Gita, Canto 12, Chapter 8. Sri Sanaka said, O Sutta, may you live long, O saintly one, best of speakers. Please continue speaking to us. Indeed, you're the only one that can show the path out of ignorance in which they're wandering. So helping with this philosophy gives us a great idea of what to expect on the path. Authorities say that Markandeya Rishi, the son of Merkandu, was an exceptionally long-lived sage who lived only as a survivor at the end of Brahma's day, when the entire universe was merged in the flood of annihilation. So again, this flood, Noah's flood, or Delucon. The Greeks talk about a flood. See God's religion with the flood? The whole world knows about a flood, except for modern man. They don't want to believe in nothing. Nothing. 3 Bibles, the Kolbrin Bible, the Old Testament, Srimad Bhagavatam, all talks about a flood. The Greeks, they have Delucon, Noah, same type of figure. So that's one thing too, believing in God and what God tells us about this creation. It's going to agitate the mundaners. The mundaners don't want to believe that this world was destroyed one time. Well, that's too bad for them. If they don't want to believe in 3 Bibles by other races of people, then that one living entity that doesn't believe, he's got a whole race of people to battle that apparently went through this. And that's why the mundane mentality is not very good. The mundaners that want to battle if these things are true, if these things are this, if these things are that, first they don't even read. If they did, they find that 3 Bibles all across the world tell the same thing. So, but this same Markandeya Rishi, the foremost descendant of Bigru, took birth in my own family during the current day of Brahma. And we have not yet seen any total annihilation in the days. So this is what the Christ is preaching, this total annihilation, this judgment day. It was known to the ancient Indians then. Well, maybe someone had God. I don't know. Also, it was well known that Markandeya, while wandering helplessly in the great ocean of annihilation, saw in those fearful waters a wonderful personality, an infant boy lying alone within a fold of a banyan leaf. O Sutta, I am most bewildered and curious about this great sage, Markandeya Rishi. O great yogi, you're the universally accepted as the authority of all the Puranas. Therefore, kindly dispel my confusion. So this now goes towards the armor of God. When this sage was praying, he had these disturbances, just kind of like the Buddha, if you've ever read his story, how he became enlightened, where these demi-forces were attacking him with the fears of death. See the principalities of this cosmos? This cosmos thinks, just like man thinks. Man isn't the only thinker in this creation. There is cosmic beings that think, known as demi-forces or Satan. And Satan thinks just like the human beings think. But Satan controls. He's the superintendent of all the living entities in this realm, and they're being controlled by God. You see this? This is exactly man's position. Inside and outside, he is being controlled by higher forces. Men do not have free will. If you are under the modes of contaminated nature and are not reborn, if you are not reborn, a twice-born surrendered soul, then you should be considered as a puppet to higher forces beyond your conscious understanding. See that thinking, how men just think? There's other beings doing the thinking for him. That's what being reborn means day by day. See the soul? It's polluted with other beings. And while this sage was praying, these other beings were causing disturbances to him. And that's taking up this twice-born knowledge. You see that Matthew 22? These beings were trying to confront the Christ. This cosmic creation thinks, and it thinks just to throw souls into hell. That's the only thing that this creation does. It just tries to kill people, which is known as death. It's very simple, isn't it? When people come here, they have to die. But the twist is, this nature is trying to kill them and throw them into hell. Unless one isn't reborn, they will not go to hell. They will not have these evil impulses dictating their lives. And they will have a supreme consciousness. That God, see what the way means? Only one consciousness guides me, not these forces of nature, these lower forces of nature. The whole point with putting on the armor of God is our own soul thoughts attack us with thoughts of death, destitution, poverty, especially extreme circumstances when the soul feels scared, worried. See, that's not you. What that is these forces of evil trying to penetrate your consciousness into a false material conception. And if you don't pray to I within me, then men are just overwhelmed with thoughts of death beyond their control. And nowadays, all that is man's mentality. His various mental diseases. He doesn't have mental diseases. What he has is spiritual ignorance and other beings conditioning his consciousness. So if beings have, there's a number. There's so many mental illnesses out there, especially over the past 30 years. Men are crippled with mental anxieties, this is a whole age of mental reprobates and defunct individuals that can't wake up out of bed. They just feel too depressed, or they have ADD, whatever, BBB, ABBB. Who cares what these people have? What they have is stupidity, no God in their consciousness, and they're being puppeted around by dark, evil beings known as the material world. So how is the psychologist doing out there with the mass population of people that are just mentally defunct? 60, 70%. They're not faring too well with the living entities. All the pills, it's not helping them too much. What helps man get past the boat of nescience? See, the nescience, the evil, he has to pray. There is no other way, but he can't just sit there and pray. He has to pray to the one consciousness which has been revealed as Jesus Christ. So after being purified by his father's performance of prescribed rituals, this Markandeya Rishi, Brahma who's been initiated, studied the Vedic hymns and strictly observed the religious principles. And he became advanced in austerity and Vedic knowledge and remained a lifelong celibate. A lifelong celibate just means you're dedicated to one person, one virtue. See, love the Lord thy God. Well, the only love you can get is from spiritual consciousness by sacrificing your time to the commandments and to the way. Appearing most peaceful with his matted hair and his clothing made of bark, he furthered his spiritual progress by carrying the mendicant's water pot. So these guys are hardcore. These guys are hardcore. These are your hardcore priests. They walk around just like the monks do back in the day, with nothing. You know why they walk around with nothing? Because they rely on a supreme consciousness, God, to give them all in their periphery as well. That's why they pray, because they've been awarded the absolute truth, which is the one consciousness. And now the one consciousness guides and dictates their life, and it tells them to deny thyself because they're in the mode of ignorance or evil or darkness or Satan. So that's why these guys walk around with watering pots, staves, sacred threads. They just walk around with nothing because they're told about the soul and its evil. God doesn't tell man to do that for any old reason. He tells him that he's under darkness or demi-forces, as we'll get to in a minute. So verse 12, Lord Brahma, Bhrigu Muni, Lord Shiva, Prajapati Daksha, and great sons of Brahma, and many others, among the human beings, demigods, forefathers, and ghostly spirits, were all astonished by the achievement of Markandeya Rishi. So that's when they said in Matthew 22, come, let us kill him. See these demi-forces? They're jealous towards man's spiritual progress. These outer beings that men cannot see. But they operate in his own consciousness to confuse him. They operate as fear. They operate as anger, worry. And if these forces are allowed to operate, then they'll kill, you could say, spiritual awareness or spiritual consciousness. So verse 13, in this way, devotional mystic Markandeya maintained rigid celibacy through penance, study of the Vedas, and self-discipline. With his mind thus free from all disturbances, he turned inward and meditated on the Supreme which lies beyond the material senses or these material disturbances. But here's the thing with now being attacked, as people say. See, the battle is not with the flesh anymore. It's with these principalities of darkness. So while the mystic sage thus concentrated his mind by the power of prayer, the tremendous period of 6 lifetimes of Manu passed by. O Brahma, during the 7th reign of Manu, the current age, Lord Indra came to know of Markandeya's austerities and became fearful of his growing mystic potency and thus tried to impede the sage's results. So just like Matthew 22, we have the devil, or like the blueprint of the city of the 9 gates. The resurrection knowledge of Jesus Christ includes Indra or Zeus, and they are over the soul nature. So when men try to gain higher wisdom, their own soul will disturb them if they don't know the blueprints behind the city of the 9 gates. The city of the 9 gates has these hidden forces known as darkness working within the soul itself. That's why it says praying on the supreme person, the one person. It'll remove these disturbances or these devils that plague man. See, that's the thing with spiritual consciousness. When we're going through life, there's always going to be impediments on the path. And it's not with persons. It's not going to be with your wife. See, if you're practicing God and your wife is giving you problems, it's not the flesh. It isn't her. It is these beings acting or operating upon man's senses, appearing as your wife, or appearing as the antagonist or your boss. See, they're not persons. They appear as persons. That's something tricky to understand. These demi-forces appear as persons antagonistic towards our goal, which is higher knowledge. They might appear as friends, family, situations. Remember, you're in nature, and this nature has a superintendent known as death looking to throw all the souls away from the straight path to higher knowledge. It's also what it says in the Quran. I will make sure, and also it says that in the book 1 and 2 of Adam and Eve. So forces like Indra, one of the fallen angels, the devil says, I will make sure to keep them away from the straight path, to keep them away from faith, to keep them away from your covenants, or to keep you away from revealing yourself within you. This self-revelation of God anyways. The devil, or one's own soul nature, will be operated upon. And it's always going to try to block your own individual self from secret place of the Most High, or from God realization itself. That's the nature of this material nature. It is Satan, evil, and the only goal in this nature is to throw men into hell and to keep them away from anything related to God. This realm is very ignorant, and it operates off an atheistic mode of ignorance, known as Satan in the scriptures, looking to take man away from the straight path, God realization. And that's also the scriptures in the Bhagavad Gita. So reading these things gives us an idea of what we're going up against. Practicing God is going to be a little bit tricky once people go up against the 3 disasters, or they think that they made mistakes in life, or they think they did this, or they think they did that. This matter does not exist. What was operating over your thinking was the devil and his angels. But ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free, that I am within the midst of you, and you are a supreme person just like me. 2 Corinthians 13 verse 5. Do you not know that the spirit of I is Jesus Christ? You are the transcendental consciousness, but you have to reveal it. See, don't be like one of the Greeks out there thinking that you're already immortal, doing ill religion, homosexuality. No, you have to be revealed immortality. But while you're going through this, there's going to be hell to pay. And that's these cosmic beings trying to stop us from ever achieving anything higher than what it had before. Remember, Satan also had the light, and it rages war against anybody that tries to get their own divinity. This is very significant on the path. That's why not that many people have immortality or can understand these things. So, verse 16, to ruin the sage's spiritual progress or practice. See, these demi-forces, they are in man, and they arouse lust. So Lord Indra sent Cupid lust, and all of a sudden lust will conjure up imaginings in the minds of men. And this is what impedes man off the spiritual progress, because they'll be agitated to go perform lust, which is, they think, a part of themselves, but it's not. Remember, these lustful effects are ripples from evil beings. And evil beings will always try to ruin spiritual progress. Or you could say in the book 2 of Ezra, Adam, he's been given an evil impulse. Or like it says in the book 1 and 2 of Adam and Eve, now Satan is your master. This is the price men have to pay. They're under evil all the time, and they have to pray to me. Only God can remove these evils or stop these things to ruin our spiritual progress on the path. Remember, what God teaches is that the imagination is not real. So whatever one is going through in life, you're going to have to pray to the one transcendental intelligence. And what that means is God is like a cook with a big pot of soup, and this creation is just known as chaos. There's a whole bunch of people down here, things, energies, and it's just being stirred in a chaotic circle. But God is stirring the pot. And what God does is he takes us out of this stirring. That's what's known as the resurrection, or coming out from under the law. But only God's invisible prayer, or his hand, can take us out of this stirring of darkness and evil. But remember, this stirring, like Matthew chapter 6. You see the creation, how he tells us not to take thought for it? Because I'm stirring this creation around into destruction. Do you see how the birds don't take thought for their life? Because they too are going around this circle that God is doing with his invisible motions. And God is looking to take us out of this stirring and back home to Godhead. All within us, all within our own prayers. A day-by-day renewal out of the law. But while this is happening, it's like a caterpillar. The old human soul will agitate the butterfly, or I trying to get into this immortal state with God, or the secret place of the Most High. See, just like how the caterpillar has to struggle, build a cocoon, and then you could say break free from nature and become a butterfly, that's what men have to do in their own souls. They have to cocoon themselves in prayer, just like the caterpillar does. You see this point of withdraw? That's a very important observation of prayer. It's a withdrawing our souls or our energies into this cocoon. And these cosmic beings will pressure us. So that's what builds this cocoon around this caterpillar. But in order for the caterpillar to break the cocoon of forces, these pressures, these situations, you could say Satan trying to pressure us. See how nature pressures? But prayer and this new way breaks free into something new or into the immortal. That's the idea about the principalities. That when men pray, they're going to withdraw into themselves, but the forces of nature are going to try to weave a web of evil around the yogi or the person praying. Same thing. The person studying Matthew chapter 6 is going to have a web of evil around them. Just like the caterpillar and the cocoon now. But the idea is to break the cocoon, or else you can't fly. You have to break death. But when men are praying, they're actually drawing in God. And on the outside, evil is trying to spin a web around them. And that's what spiritual enlightenment means. Is now one's been freed of this process, and it takes a constant coming back home to me, or Matthew 11, come to me all who are wearied and find life burdensome. There's a hidden power known as faith and wisdom. And men have to withdraw their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions away from the world, just like the caterpillar has to withdraw into the cocoon. But you can see the forces of nature. Our battle is not with the flesh anymore. Our battle is with this force spinning the cocoon of evil around us. And when we put on the armor in Ephesians 6, enlightenment or self-realization, or I will manifest myself, is what breaks man out of the law and into grace. But he has to follow that principle. And as you can see, it doesn't happen overnight. The caterpillar doesn't change into the butterfly overnight. This is man's way of transformation, and it's going to take time anyways, just like anything else in creation. But in order for people to do that, they have to understand what they're going through. That while they're praying and withdrawing their efforts, they're going to have evil spun around them. And they have to expect that, or else they're not going to make any progress with God. And just remember, God's the controller. So he just says in Matthew 10, come to me, I'm the door. I'm the one that fights these disturbances or networks of evil around you while you're trying to pray for me. It's almost like the water of a tide. The tide goes forward, but men's prayers recede backwards. And this creation keeps on going, and that's what constitutes the cocoon. But God can spring up a new wine within us, which is known as his spirit, and that's what breaks this network of evil that could be penetrating our lives. So I hope that helped, and until next time, take care.